Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, Week in Review. I'm your host, Jim Love. This week we have our regular panel. We have Terry Cutler, the head of Cyology Labs, one of the top 40 global thought leaders by the Life Safety Alliance. And this recognition, we joke it with Terry a lot, but this is a huge honor. And so congratulations.
Thank you. I always tell people, like, I can win all these big awards, but I can't even influence my kids to come to the table without an iPad. So.
Yeah, well, keep working on that one. The awards are easier. David Shipley, head of Beauceron Security back in beautiful Fredericton.
Hello. Yes. Glad to be home for a week and then off to beautiful Quebec City and next week to meet with credit unions. So the road show continues, but I'm glad to be home for a week and do my laundry.
Yeah. And we have brought back the mighty Laura Payne, head of White Toque. You can't get any more Canadian than that. But Laura, you accept U.S. customers as well, right? We have a big U.S. base. We don't want to offend them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, we are active in the U.S.
What do you call that? Well, it can't be White Toque, right?
Oh, it's still White Toque. Of course it is.
Amazing.
Good for you.
We're converting beanies to toques one customer at a time.
I want to be part of that campaign and let us know. Yeah. Now,
Absolutely.
long live the toque.
There you go. And David, I saw something on LinkedIn. Your company's doing an expansion to the U.S., looking for partners.
We've been so busy this summer. I didn't even realize we crossed the 1,000 customer thresholds. Now it's like 1,037 customers. And from a startup perspective, we've hit a pretty interesting milestone. We hit what's known as 5 million in annual recurring revenue, which is a lot harder than I ever imagined it was going to be, but it's been amazing so far. And now we're growing in the US and taking our good made in Canada technology and our psychology and behavioral economics know-how into banks, into telecommunications firms and more. And we're working with MSPs, and we've done a lot in that space to really help people get value out of their security programs. And there's so much more to be done.
And you have the hairstyle to prove how stressful it was.
I had cool hair when I founded this company. No, I lost all my hair working cybersecurity for a university, truthfully.
I tell you, are we the odd men out here? You work in the States as well?
I'm all over the place. We do business in Dubai, Bermuda, Algeria, Canada, US.
I feel lonely. I've returned to AI consulting, doing a lot more other technical consulting, some cybersecurity, but it's me and a couple of other guys. And so far, maybe we'll expand out. You never know. Now we find out where everybody is. Let's get started. Everyone knows the format. The audience does too, for the most part. But if you're new, I come up with some stories I think were the most interesting stories from the past week in cybersecurity. And we do a little bit of a deeper dive on those with our panel. Okay, so I want to start out with Jessica. We missed the episode last week, and Jessica, we haven't forgotten you. And Jessica wrote us and said she's a huge fan of the show, but she said that my data has been compromised from over 7 major breaches over the last 10 years. And she wanted to know if paying for a service that searches and asks to remove my data from data brokers would be something that would help reduce my risk, or would this somehow cause more harm than good? Would you recommend this overall? And what would you personally do if you've been involved in major data breaches? So, panel, who wants to go first? Terry?
Sure. Well, Jessica, thanks so much for the question. I think it's very difficult to know if, you have to weigh out the cost benefit and the effectiveness. So for example, we offer dark web monitoring services as well. But what we often find is that, yes, okay, let's say we found your data and you get an alert on it. And then a couple of weeks later, another company got breached. And also now we've purchased their data leak or the pastebin, whatever it is. And we put it back into our system. It re-indexes. All of a sudden now new data has been found. But in reality, it's still old data because it was part of another older data breach. So we never know what we're going to find. So I don't know if there's really a true method to remove that data from the dark web.
Yeah. Data breaches are a bit like radioactive dosage. It's cumulative and you never ever get rid of it fully. That being said, taking efforts to try and pull data from data brokers, as long as the cost is within something that you personally find valuable, it's not going to hurt you. What's unfortunate and missing for a lot of people in Canada is the ability to actually do something when they realize that their threshold for data breaches has now hit the point where Basically, it's got all the keys of the kingdom for identity theft, opening a credit file, getting a mortgage, getting a loan, getting a credit card, that type of thing. Your address is out there. Your social insurance number is out there. Your past employment history information is out there. Just think about those applications. At that point, the best thing you can do is actually work with the credit bureaus to put notes on your file. Hey, I've got to be in person to get new credit. And ideally, you'd have the ability to do a credit freeze, which is something Americans very much have access to and rights to. And only Quebecers in Canada at current have legislation that supports. So there are different tools that are out there. It's always good to know what's out there. It's really good to try and get some control back on that. I'll never discourage you that. But when you hit certain thresholds with certain levels of data exposure, the next step is to become more of an active participant in controlling your financial identity. And unfortunately, that adds friction. It means it becomes slower to get a loan, do all those things, but it is the best protective work you can do. And if you're Canadian, ask your province why they don't have legislation giving you credit freeze.
I would just echo what both Terry and David said, and make sure to take advantage of those services, right? If they're offered to you, or if you haven't been so lucky to be part of the breach lottery yet and don't have one that's been offered to you because your data's been breached, but look in your bank features, you may already have access to credit monitoring there as well. It's part of a lot of banking packages that are offered now, so you can be proactive. And keep on top of it as best you can. But the data brokers, or removing the data from the data brokers, I think it's personal decision. I don't think there's a great answer right now for cost benefit analysis that universally applies.
It's interesting more is like, every time there's a data breach, they're offering you credit monitoring. So it's like now you're on like 7 monitoring systems.
Probably all done by the same company. Who
And none
God
of us wants to
forbid,
hear what happens when they get breached, right?
Yeah.
None of us want to be part of that day.
Well, and
Yeah.
let's not forget Equifax, which is a company that holds all this information, was horribly breached. So yeah, all of this has happened before.
And then they offer you the credit monitoring service that they also own.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the overwhelming thing is like chicken soup can't hurt, but your data's out there, probably not much you can do about it. If it's out there, especially if crooks have it, they're probably not going to give it back. But it's never too late to take some control over your own cybersecurity, whether you're an individual, small office owner, whatever. There are some basic things that you can do. Panel?
Yeah. So first of all, MFA everywhere, all the time. And ideally app-based MFA. Yes, it's super annoying, but we can stop digital lockpicking by 99.9%. And by that, I mean those brute force rinse and repeat attacks, like the one that Clean CRA's clock, our national tax agency in Canada, for 600,000 people. So any MFA, however, is still good, better than nothing. You'll hear some cybersecurity professionals say, oh my God, don't use text-based MFA. Hey man, if that's the only thing your national tax agency offers, ICRA, call me. We would love to give you some free advice on how to set up app-based MFA. So MFA everywhere. As I mentioned before, if you have been exposed and your information is out there, locking down your credit is also important. Use a password manager. And I don't care if you are using a great app like 1Password or you're using a notebook because you're 65 years old, you live alone. Your threat model is no one else is in the house and they're going to break in to steal my password book. That's pretty rare. So just do that. Do not use the same password. And a brief shout out to NIST. Those of you who read the NIST publications, NIST has come out now and actually clearly said the complex passwords that people just add an extra character on every year and rotating your password on stupid fixed links don't actually help. So longer passwords, better, and keep them until you know that they've been breached, but don't reuse similar patterns.
Maybe I could just add something fast with the password managers. I had a customer that called me up a year and a half ago. I can't remember the name of the password managers.
Hopefully that helps, Jessica. And I might do a special show on just protecting yourself as an individual. And I think that's a good thing to keep in the back of our mind. We might do that over the Christmas holidays or something like that, or in the approach up to Christmas. So thanks a lot for the letters. Keep them coming, and they help us point us in the direction of the things you want us to talk about. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business did a study and published it this week. It took a look at independent or small businesses with fraud, and it had some interesting observations. And it was in the past 12 months, they say that over half of business owners, 50%, have experienced attempted or successful fraud. Now listen, that word fraud is used intentionally because they go beyond cybersecurity. Email scams and phishing, 85% of the common types of fraud experienced by small businesses. Text scams were from 77% of them. And I'm seeing more of those. I got, and we'll talk about that. Phone call scams, this 20% that was reported, and that was on frauds and chargebacks. And this is hit almost 20% of the businesses. Fraudulent payments and chargebacks coming where people will charge something on a card and they'll say that they didn't buy it or things like that. That one's between you and your credit card maker. There's not a cybersecurity aspect to that. But this whole idea of passing fraudulent documents into people, saying messages that say, I pay this bill, and 20% of companies are paying that. That's a huge outlay. They say that, that the average cost to businesses is close to $8,000, but there are bigger tickets than that. Panel, what do you think?
So I'll start off I love money math. I've come to love that as I become an entrepreneur and a business person. What struck me here is that if we take that average and when we look at the number of Canadian businesses that could actually impact, you're talking about a potential up to $9.2 billion impact to the Canadian economy, which actually tracks because on the personal fraud loss side, the RCMP regularly report they receive about $500 to $600 million in personal reported fraud. And they estimate that's only 10 to 15% of the total fraud amount. So now all of a sudden, when you start adding the multi-billion dollar cost of fraud in Canada, we're losing more money than we spend on national defense, which is absolutely stunning. Now, I really like the point you made, Jim, like all cybercrime it has elements of fraud, but not all fraud is cyber. And this is what the RCMP often refer to technology as target or technology as the enabler of crime. What we've seen in our research is there's a thing called optimism bias. It's well researched in psychology. And if we're generally wired as human beings to think bad thing X happens to other people, not to me. And I can tell you that if you're thinking that way, you're 30 to 40% more likely to have an incident. So you need to understand the first step in this journey is yes, this is going to happen to you. Absolutely. Now prepare for it. If you stick your head in the sand like a cyber ostrich, you are going to get run over. Because as you said, Jim, this is the average loss of 8,000. And considering most Canadian small businesses are less than 10 employees, I can tell you 8,000 is material to your business. That's just the average.
We've seen some cases too, where they can mention small businesses don't really care about cybersecurity because they always think that's, it's going to happen to someone else. I'm too small to get hacked. Who's going to want to hack me? We're also starting to see things where scammers are duplicating their Facebook pages, duplicating their websites, and they're driving traffic to their fictitious site. So to say a real example, one of my buddies had their Facebook page cloned, and he runs a shipping container business. And these people thought they were buying from a legit company, paid to get their container, and the container obviously never arrived, to a point where they're harassing the real company. Where's my stuff? Then they have no idea what you're talking about. Or there's even ones where the guy's website is getting cloned and they're sending fictitious invoices to their clients, and the invoices look completely legit. So they're like, how on earth did they get this? When did we get hacked? There's a whole investigation has to occur. They don't realize that doing an investigation or an incident response is very costly. And a lot of times it could be avoided very, very quickly, but they don't care about it until it's too late.
All those points, and just also letting people know, like, the attackers aren't, for the most part, picking on a particular business. It's not like Joe's Corner Garage suddenly surfaced as a top 10 hit on Google for the attacker or wherever they are. It's all opportunity attacks. The vast majority are opportunity attacks, right? There's a lot of automated scanning that happens, and the whole ecosystem around one party is doing scanning. They put together a list of juicy targets, and that gets sold to somebody else who then is going after them. So I think when people realize that it's not because of who you are, it's just the fact that you exist and have a presence on the internet that makes you a target, then they can see, oh, that's why it matters, right? Just the fact that I live in this neighborhood means I need to take better care of myself and my property.
Yeah, I think one of the things that prevents small businesses from doing anything, because there are a lot of very small businesses, and they are still targeted. I mean, they can be easy targets. So one of the things that alienates them is the complexity of what we do. I've looked even at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has a great small and medium-sized business evaluation. It's still monolithic for the average business. And I'm hoping that to all cybersecurity professionals, when you get contacted by a small business, I'd rather say, look, you might not want to do everything, but something's better than nothing. So here's 5 key things you can do. Validate your backups, have MFA.
We regularly go out and actually do community events and things like that. And that's exactly our message is you don't need to be a rocket science. You just need to know that it matters to you. And this is what you're trying to protect against. Again, you're not trying to protect against, some crazy hacker group somewhere that's like masterminding their way into your business. It's just, you just want to not be the slowest running away from the bear. That's the goal here. And a lot of things are free, right? You don't need to pay extra for MFA most of the time, right? It might be worth it if it's a core system of yours to upgrade to a plan where you would have MFA, your main CRM where all of your business flow goes through. That's probably worth having MFA on. And just, step by step, protect your accounts, protect your end devices, have a look around at some of the other things that you make use of in your business and just take care of those basics. And then that's got 90% of your issues covered right there. And security awareness training, right?
Thank you for the non-security awareness training. You can educate folks and you can reduce your click rates up to 8 times in the first 90 days. That's huge. If you don't train your employees, 35% of them will click on phishes or open attachments or do things. So 1 in 3, that can hurt. But the other thing that I would say, just to add to Laura's points, is identify the material amount of money that's meaningful to your business and make sure you've got good financial processes, AKA someone emailing impersonating you as the leader of the company can't get your staff to transfer more than X amount of money. And I've lived through this before. So make sure people know, hey, if I'm telling you to send $50,000 and that's our entire bank account, obviously that's an in-person conversation. So business email compromise is 3 times the amount of ransomware globally in financial impacts to businesses. So pay attention to your money.
And I think for small businesses, I'll just leave it with this. One of the things that we've tried to teach them is stop and ask. And if you're a cybersecurity professional out there, this is number 1. When you look at something, stop and ask. You get an invoice to be paid. Is that really it? I know the president's phone number. I know you sent me an email saying pay it. I'm just going to call and ask. It just takes a second and you never look stupid. And if anybody makes you look stupid, they know nothing about protecting the company. So just leave it at that. Moving on to a story we did this week, Evilginx, an open source software that can bypass multi-factor authentication. This blew me away. Did anybody catch this story, Ben?
I did. To be clear, Evilginx is a very useful tool for ethical hackers, ethical consensual hackers, ethical hackers to use when they're doing social engineering pen tests with your companies that includes features designed for human in the loop social engineering. What do I mean by that? That means they're actually following through with the peeps to in real time capture MFA codes to get persistence on a device and capture session cookies, etc. Those not familiar, by the way, crooks did a lot of damage with session cookie capture through various criminal marketplaces. In fact, the RCMP did a fantastic job with international police forces disrupting one of those marketplaces, Genesis Markets. But these toolings out there, it's not a bad thing that this tooling is being used by professionals to help organizations strengthen that. But we also have to recognize this tooling is becoming as popular with criminals as pirated copies of other security tools like Cobalt Strike is. So it's out there. MFA for a long time had a really positive impact on a bunch of different social engineering scenarios. And I mentioned earlier, it's still valuable for brute force digital lockpicking. It is less and less. And this is why I hated the term. I would say it's phishing proof. No, it's phishing resistant. That resistance is eroding. And one of the key things that I would tell to sysadmins right now, and I know you're about to groan because you fought for 5 years to get MFA turned on. And among the compromises that you've had to make is the frequency of MFA challenges. You're going to have to revisit that. If you allow for too long of a period of MFA session persistence, I'm going to steal that cookie and I'm going to be in your organization in all kinds of uncomfortable ways. And now you're going to have to rethink that scenario, particularly with remote work, which means friction with the organization. And criminals are counting on that. And so now it's not a technology problem. It's a social culture problem and a perception of value and friction problem. And it's only going to get worse. And this is going to be 10 times harder than getting MFA in your organization. But you have to be ready for this fight.
Let's back up just for a second, just for everybody and I'm sure many of the people who listen to this podcast are technical, they may know what's going on, but it intercepts your traffic between you and a legitimate website, pretends to be that website, and passes through it. Nothing big there. What it does do is it captures this thing called session cookies. And cookies are the thing that validate you. They're the reason why you can move from one web page to another. It's stored on a cookie. And those cookies are valid forever or for a session. Now, Terry, I might rely on you for this one because I'm not sure that I haven't done development for a long time. But session lengths, if your session lengths are so long that somebody can intercept them for days, then you have a basic problem. Terry, do you want to pick up on this a little bit? You probably know this better than I do.
When we often do these types of tactics when we do penetration testing, where we can actually clone a web page, let's say the Office 365 login. People are thinking, well, how on earth could you have cloned it so perfectly? Dude, it takes literally 13 seconds to do it. Type in the URL, boom, it's done. And then we can enable like JavaScript and stuff like that, or a proxy system that allows us to intercept when they type in username and password. And then from there, once they type in username and password, it'll actually pass that information off to the real legit service. And the legit service will pass back a 2FA request back to us, and we pass that back down to the user. So it's totally transparent. The moment they've entered that information, we've captured the entire session token, and then we can get access to their system. Emails, causing a business email compromise, all these bad things can happen. But we had a real situation that happened a year or two ago, where my buddy was a victim of a scam. He lost $440,000. So what happened was he thought he was logging into his bank, but he didn't realize that the URL was .ru. And that's one thing people need to pay attention to is the URL. If it's not the real URL, obviously it's a phishing link. So he typed in his username, password, and his two-factor authentication token. And that session stayed locked for 15 minutes, not 30 seconds, 15 minutes. That means that when he realized that there was somebody in his bank account, he couldn't log in for an additional 10 minutes because his account was locked for that session. So we have to really look at session length for sure.
Laura?
I think too, one of the things that people talk about, they've defeated MFA. It's like, no, you didn't. You just fished people a new way, right? Like, just said the MFA still worked, right? It was just, you got somebody to use their token with a site that wasn't the real site. It's not rocket science, right? So when people ask me, is MFA secure? Why should I bother using it? I said, it is absolutely way better than a regular username and password. I can't think off the top of my head yet of an attack that I've seen that truly defeated MFA. It phished somebody, whether it was you or whether it was the telecom to take over your SIM card or take over your phone number and transfer it to a new SIM card.
Thank you, Laura, for saying that that MFA is not defeated. That was the one thing that I hope no one would take from this. They've gotten around it, and there are things people should do. Like I said, I think shorten session limits, making sure that people don't go back. And Terry, you talked about it. If you're transferring a lot of money, don't click on a link that somebody sent you to transfer it. Type the URL in yourself. There's just too many ways to fool URLs with foreign characters, with just things that you don't notice, like a couple of characters being wrong in it. If it involves money, you wouldn't put the money out on the street, leave it there, and say, I'll walk it to the bank later. Take a few minutes to make sure that you're sure, and that's something I think we can talk about with our staff. Again, a lot of training in this, and a lot of not walking away from MFA just because we've heard a story about it, how it got beaten at one point.
Yeah, I think the big thing, just to Laura's point, is understanding what MFA is best intention for, right? Does it prevent easier takeover of accounts? Yes, it does. It raises the bar. Does it prevent brute force more effectively than not having it? Absolutely. Is it bypassable with phishing? Yes. And it's the onion, it's the Swiss cheese, whatever food model works for you of layered defense. And so it's not one or the other. It's not do phishing training and you don't need MFA. And it's not like MFA and you don't need to educate your users and have good social engineering resistance throughout your culture. Because if you're relying on one or the other, you're going to get pwned by Terry if you've hired him to do that.
Consensual, between two consensual companies. I love that. This is going to be our new term.
Or if you don't pay the bill.
Terry, I think you've been hanging around with the guys with the baseball bats too long. just a thought. This story blew me away, and I think sometimes I wonder whether I get the odd critique about me being too editorial on the podcast, but I'm old enough to say what I think. And the amount of data that's gathered on us has always bothered me. But the FTC in the US finally came out with a huge report, and it's well worth looking at. And we've got a link in the podcast stories, and I'll make sure that there's a link in the weekend stories as well. But they put out a report called Looking Behind the Screens, and it revealed what they called a simply staggering surveillance and practices by major tech companies. Now, this is all of the major tech companies: Amazon, Meta, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, Discord, Reddit, WhatsApp. They're all adding these things. Now, if you think they're gathering a lot of data on you, you're just scratching the surface. I mean, they collect everything from your name and address, what you do, all the way to your religious beliefs. And this is all being gathered. Some firms couldn't identify all the collected data points. And these firms didn't do this survey willingly, trust me. But they couldn't identify all the collected data points or the third parties they were sharing your data with. Algorithms and AI, not much oversight on those. And here's my scary part. I was using ChatGPT's new voice recognition and voice chat software. It remembered something I'd done on ChatGPT and talked to me about it. So, this gathering of data, and we're just at the start of it with the AI revolution. It's already out of control. So the FTC has stepped in on this, at least to study it and put it into one concrete report. And they say, why are they doing it? Well, predicting, shaping, and monetizing human behavior is profitable. I mean, as professionals, am I crazy about this?
If I put my marketing hat on for a second, back in the day, we used to wait for people to opt into an email list, right? But then they'd be part of a sequence. They receive a bunch of emails, then eventually buy my stuff, right? They get these types of emails. People are fed up of that. So they don't want to give away their email anymore. They receive way too much email in their inbox all the time. There's so much spam. So now we have to revert to tracking pixels. What it means is that I can target people that come to my site, as an example, and let's say I put out a video. I can then target everybody that says, hey, everybody that's come to my website that's watched at least 35 seconds of my video, show them video number 2, but don't show them video 1 anymore. And then once they watch video 2 for the same amount of length or whatever length I want, okay, don't show them video 1 and 2 anymore, show them video 3. So now I'm talking directly to the people now. By the time they hit video 4, video 5, it's like, hey, Jim, I know you've been interacting with my stuff because I've been targeting you. And now, because you've been watching my stuff for so long, let me make you an offer. And then let's do a free audit on your company and go from there. So then from there, I'm going to add more value to your life, your business, gain your trust, and people buy from people they like and trust. I just gave away the secret.
The thing we're talking about here is surveillance capitalism. This is the evolution of our economy in ways that have unintended consequences. And let's give a Canadian example on this. Tim Hortons got itself into double trouble. We used that in a past season of the show. They did not know that the third-party company that they had hired to embed analytics software into the app was collecting the level of detail that it was. For example, not only was it a jealous lover, like it knew when I was heading over to Starbucks or maybe hitting up a Wendy's, it also could tell what floor of a building I was in. It was using the sensors on the device for the actual measurement of where I was geospatially. This is incredibly valuable detail. In communications theory, which is my undergraduate, the ability to perfect the messages you send at the frequency to send to influence the human decision-making process is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. However, it is inherently anti-free will, anti-choice, right? This is all about influence. So we have to have some boundaries on this. When I was a kid, they used to target us with Saturday morning cartoon shows that were packed full of sugary breakfast foods, toys my parents didn't want, and other things, until people got pissed off, told their legislators, hey, stop targeting kids who are impressionable, and we put laws in place and guardrails to protect that. We are still missing a lot of the guardrails on this data. The amount of information collected, used, and weaponized against us, and Tim Cook gave a famous speech from Apple about this, is astounding. There are 5,000 data brokers in the States alone. Jessica earlier was talking about getting her data back from these people that hold this vast amount of information. This is a tough problem that one individual does not have a hope in hell of changing. This takes collective action, which is much, much harder. I'm glad the FTC did this study. I'm glad we're showing it. The Social Dilemma on Netflix talked about how this information is collected and weaponized by social media platforms. But to use my arts and culture critic hat and wrap up, the level of data gathered and weaponized against us would give George Orwell a mental breakdown. His 1984 doesn't even come close to 2024.
And what could I add to that?
You got to come in before Shipley. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, it really is. I think part of it too, and just for I'll try to end on an optimistic note for people's mental health and well-being, is, you do have some degree of control, right? You choose your actions. And if this is something that really bothers you, then where you can limit or modify how you interact with the platforms that are the worst offenders, right? So just be an informed consumer. You now know. Now you have choices. If you want to go cash-based and only shop bricks and mortar, you have that choice. Hopefully you live somewhere where you can get what you need doing that.
And I'm a capitalist. I don't like over legislation. I've run a small business. I've watched what regulation can do to you. But I'm lost all trust. And if that hadn't been in that report, reading through LinkedIn last week and finding out that, oh, by the way, we've been using your data for training our AI. Where is this? And why am I finding out about it? Oh, I'm finding out about it because the Europeans are so far ahead of us on privacy legislation. And somebody in London said, LinkedIn, you can't do that anymore. And then they had to fess up. I'm really lost on this one because on one hand, like I said, you want business to be able to function and make money and do things. That's what makes jobs. That's what drives the economy. That's what drives innovation. On the other hand, when companies do egregious things like this, I'm sorry. You're a billion-dollar company or multi-billion-dollar company with lots of people. You've got to have somebody smart enough to think using all this data that people put in for their own networking purposes to train our AI without telling them. You're all LinkedIn users. What do you think?
I think some people are starting to have some fun with it. Honestly, I've seen a few posts from folks who said, let's turn September into the post-garbage in LinkedIn month. But I think it follows. Sometimes it feels like these are new, but it's not, right? Anything where you use it for free and it has a significant value proposition to you as a user, you're the product. You know that things are happening behind the scenes that you don't have awareness of. It doesn't excuse the company from not doing what it's supposed to do and providing the appropriate notices. But I think, I don't know that there was a trust there other than that I trust that they do things they're not supposed to do with the data.
It's always fun when you go on a social site and you request your data and you see gigs and gigs and gigs of stuff. You're like, oh my God, I thought this stuff was supposed to be erased. Perfect example, Snapchat. One of my friends lost access to her account. It got banned. Were you sending any inappropriate content? No, I would never do that. So then she shared her password with me. I got in through the back end, downloaded the history, and sure enough, there was enough stuff in there to disrupt my morning. It had everything from voice recordings, chats, screenshots. Every single thing was there. It was gigs and gigs and gigs. So it keeps track of everything.
I think the thing about LinkedIn, this episode is brought to you by the letter C for consent. And so you can't just be like, retroactively, we started recording this and we opted you in. Hope you're cool with it. No. Europeans are going to be hard knowing that. And a shout out to the security professional community, Brian Krebs, Rachel Toback. Everybody started screaming from the mountaintops about this. Yes, thank you. I love Garbage September. I can't wait to think about how I want to use my professional reputation to do something fun. What really irks me is I actually pay LinkedIn hundreds of dollars a year to be a professional member, and I was opted in. It's like, wait a second. I'm not even getting screwed by the I didn't pay you, so I should just expect to get abused. I paid you money and you abused me.
Whoa, and there's no easy way to opt out.
Yeah, you got to go several menus in, and that kind of dark pattern shenanigans, you want to bet that gets you a fine.
And you have to also trust that toggle means what you think it means.
I've even on a lot of these sites where they say, oh, you can opt out of this. If you stop and read them, I've started to catch a couple of them that were kind of engineered so that you would think you were opting out, but you weren't. It's a tough thing. In my mind, God bless the Europeans for at least setting a bar. I wish our government had a little more courage or got it together. Is it because they just don't have the courage to do this, or are they just so incompetent that they can't get legislation out? That's a question for everybody to answer.
You need good legislation in the first place that's really well designed to be able to handle the cases it's supposed to and not create other noise that it's not supposed to. That's a huge challenge in the beginning. And then you need enforcement agencies that are equipped to actually do their jobs once the legislation is in place to be able to go and tackle these non-compliant companies. Some cases, well, probably in all the cases, the biggest offenders are significantly better funded than any agency we're going to have in Canada and potentially in the US as well. I mean, the US government is not an infinitely funded organization, although some people would like to potentially claim that it acts like it is, but no government is an infinitely funded organization. The Europeans certainly are further ahead on that. They have a lot more people as well to be able to contribute to that kind of thought process and funding of enforcement than we have here.
Yeah, and speaking of Europeans, the German police claim to have unmasked Tor users. Now, this was clever. For those of you who don't know what the Tor browser is, it really was considered, or it still is considered, and I think technically, we'll get to the end of the story of this, I think technically is still considered to be a reliable tool for protecting your online anonymity. The Tor network is considered, and its browser is considered to be a way of protecting your online anonymity. But the German enforcement officers have been able to find a technique to unmask Tor users, and this is going to be something that I think will send some shudders through the people who use Tor. It was a laudable thing. They're going after a sex crimes group, and they're going after, and they use something they call timing analysis. I'm not sure exactly how this works. I struggled with this to figure out how this worked. But they basically monitor you on multiple nodes of the network. They can figure out where you are. They can catch your traffic, and then they see you going somewhere else, and they go, aha, that would be you. Pretty sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder for all the folks, like, who invented Tor was the U.S. Navy Intelligence Service. So if you think, I'm pulling one over the man by using this technology, I got words for you. It's like, give them the tool that we can use to monitor and make sure they think it's super secure. But ultimately, he or she that controls the nodes, and enough nodes, gets to do shenanigans and can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so that's the key part. If you are not running your own complete Tor network, as in you control all the nodes that you're going to be used seated around the world, yeah, there's an opportunity. Is it hard? Yes. Is it impossible? Absolutely no, not. Nothing on the internet is ever fully anonymous. You want anonymity? Do not have ones and zeros.
And I think also that one of the big reasons why they were able to catch this is because they were looking at long-term connections. So it was folks that were constantly connected to the same site all the time or stayed connected for a very long time. And they were able to trace that back.
Certainly, this is not opportunistic attacking or attack against an individual or surveillance for an individual. They're looking for a particular person of interest, and there's probably a very good reason for that. I still have faith. Not everybody does, but I still have faith that in general our police services are used to enforce things properly and not just go after punitive attacks against individuals for political purposes. So I do, yeah, your general Tor user, this isn't an issue. This is somebody who's already attracted attention.
I'm always of two minds on this, and I think everybody's split on this. On one hand, you're going after kids and you're exploiting kids, burn in hell and break the rules. On the other hand, there's somebody sitting in Lebanon, Iran, somewhere in Russia who is trying to effectively do good things, help people and or journalists that want to remain anonymous, and you want those to be protected. This is the balancing act of our life, I think, in terms of how we feel, our emotional response to encryption and privacy protection. And then in our earlier story, we give away our privacy for free. So,
if they can start using this towards targeting ransomware gangs and cyber criminals, this will really do good for us.
Hey, listen, there's a reason Telegram is now singing like a canary. So the squeeze is on that side, and I couldn't be happier to watch the little digital rat scurry right now on that side. Listen, end-to-end encryption, to your point, Jim, is a valuable thing. It's important. It's important for commerce. It's important for trust. It's important for civil rights and other things. I would just caution folks, things built by intelligence services are not, therefore, immune to intelligence services.
Yeah. And don't preserve, just because the Telegram guy gave away his data under pressure, don't forget, and this always mystifies me because people talk about, well, I'll store my data in Canada and it won't be all that. And, 75% of the requests that are made to tech companies for your data are honored. It's just that simple.
I guarantee you, every VPN company, every encrypted text company, they're all going to squeal on you.
Yep. Well, and in some cases, many cases, they're legally obligated, right? If somebody shows up with a warrant to ask for information and that company has access to that information, they are obligated to give it. And that's part of our social protection, right? So again, we healthy skepticism, but also trust that the system is trying to work properly as well.
Yeah. And, in terms of the Canadian sovereignty thing, realize we have treaties that if somebody calls the RCMP, asks for your data, they're going to get it. So don't work yourself up into a lather about how well you're protected. Spend your time worrying about training and making sure that your employees are well trained, and don't worry, be happy on some of this other stuff that you can't change. Maybe that's my
Practice
motto for this.
Practice the legal business, and then, all other good things could follow.
Yeah.
I think, Laura, you nailed it. The point I'm mentioning is that if you're doing crime, I don't think there's some auto magic tech that's going to keep the cops from getting you. A guy in Australia just got nailed for creating the ghost phone network. So don't do crime.
Yep. So we want to finish up with our this is a suggestion from our culture critic, David, who has proposed an award winner for what David has named the Stinkies. So
yeah.
The envelope, please, David.
This is the inaugural Stinky, and this is for hot garbage takes by cybersecurity vendors on the latest story. Listen, we're as an industry, we're really bad for ambulance chasing, and we all have to work on that. And sometimes there are just such takes that stink so bad that I've had enough. So a particular security ratings company, their CEO on LinkedIn posted that, their independent web vulnerability scanning tool of a particular vendor, Alpha Gold, of the pagers used in the targeted Israeli attack on Hezbollah a couple of weeks ago, that because they had a C on their, again, website, internet-facing scanning infrastructure score, that was a predictor that they would be vulnerable to a complex supply chain licensing hack by a nation state, is pure and utter bull something. So you earned the Stinky for this one. A lot of people in the security industry jumped on this particular LinkedIn post to say, bad dog. So bad dog you. That was awful. No, you are not able to predict through web-based vulnerability scanning if your company is vulnerable to a nation-state intelligence agency like Mossad. And that's the inaugural Stinky.
we'll design the trophy and present that. I think we can only do this once a month, but there's probably there's lots of fodder out there. I'll be losing sponsor by sponsor with you.
We'll have P. Diddy present it.
Yeah, that'll be good for the ratings too. That we actually do look for sponsors, we need them, and all that sort of stuff. We're never going to not tell it like it is. You may disagree with us, you may think we're wrong, but nobody on this program is going to be influenced by mere money. Oh, I hate having scruples. That's it for our show. Thanks to the panel. I was going to say that this was we got to get you back again, Laura. This was fun. It was nice to have you.
It's always fun. That's why I came back this time.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, and David Shipley, head of Boats Around Security, and our award presenter for the Stinkies. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And Terry Cutler, always great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for spending part of your weekend with us. We love your questions. We love your directions. We love your comments. You can make your own Stinky Award to us in there, and we'll be glad to hear from you. I'll be back with the cybersecurity news stories on Monday morning. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.